Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the November Academic Excellence Committee meeting. We are glad to see those of you who are with us in the room, and for those joining us online, welcome as well. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Watts for opening comments.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'll be brief as I invite Mr. Butler up to the microphone to report out today on two very important topics, but one that we are looking at policy implication around, and that one is grading, which we know is essential as we look at student performance and how parents gauge and understand how their students might be performing, which has implications for lots of other things in a student trajectory, K-12 and beyond. So that is an important discussion, and we're looking forward to feedback from the board on how to guide that policy recommendation. And then the second topic of today has to do with our math curriculum. And so with that said, we are excited to continue to pursue academic excellence in our work, and I'll transition over to Mr. Butler.
All righty. Well, great afternoon. Thank you, Madam Superintendent and Committee Chair Grabowski. As has already been shared today, we'll share an update on our district's grading practices and policy revision process and progress. And then we'll also, time permitting, we'll share some updates on our materials adoption, specifically our math textbook adoption process and progress. But first, we'll begin with our grading practices and policy revision process. This really sits at the core of our commitment to academic excellence, as the superintendent indicated, as we really strive to define and refine what it means for every student to have a high-quality baseline learning experience, and really our commitment to ensure that every student has access to fair, consistent, and accurate ways for them to demonstrate their learning. As you know, our strategic priority number one calls us to ensure that we have rigorous experiences for all of our students, and really grading is an important part of that mission. It's really one of the most powerful signals that we send to our students, our families, and in many ways our colleges and universities about what we value, how learning is measured, and what it means to grow academically. Today, as we shared just a moment ago, there are policy implications for policy IHA grading systems. You have access to policy IHE, promotion and retention, and while we will not take a deep dive, you have that as a reference, as there may be some potential implications there. We'll also talk about, as I shared, the materials adoption. You do not have access in your packet to the policy on IFAA, but we want to make sure that we are referencing that, as that is a part of what we'll be following in terms of our math textbook adoption. There are some other policy implications here as well, and so we'll have some opportunity to talk about that, but really today is about a discussion, a hearing from our board. What are those values? What are those things that are top of mind for you as it relates to the grading policy? Excited to share with you that we've had an opportunity to engage many of our stakeholders in this work already. And so we'll share with you just a small glimpse of what we've learned thus far, and look forward to coming back in January with a more synthesized report to help inform and shape our next steps. You may recall recent internal audit revealed that there were some levels of grading variability across our district. There were a few key things that were lifted up in the audit. Inconsistent assignment weighting between schools and classrooms, varied approaches to late work. We also included in that audit a review of how we utilize Brightspace in general, but also how that currently exists within the grading practice and process. And then, of course, we wanted to note that there were some implications around equity for different student populations. What you see here on the screen and what you also have in your packet is an infographic to help you digest what was in the audit if you've not had an opportunity to take a look at it, or just as a reference point, rather than going back and taking a look at the audit. This was provided by Hanover, who we are partnering with as part of our stakeholder engagement process through the policy revision work. And so that is there for your review as well. Again, here are the key areas for policy regulation refinement. I will say that there were some other topics that were specific under these umbrellas that surfaced in our conversations and our engagement with our students, with our teachers and staff, as well as our district cross-functional teams, and as recently as this month with our parent group, as we've had an opportunity to launch our engagement series with our parents as well. And so these are some of the things that we learned from them, and also what we heard from board members as well that is top of mind, although we've not had a discussion set aside just for grading, but these are some of the things that surfaced as well. I do want to pause here, but I'm going to continue. You have this in your packet, just if you wanted to capture what we wanted to note from you. What are the topics that are most important for us to consider in our policy review and refinement? So if you'll do that, but we're going to continue the conversation. You have that available in your packet as well, but wanted to capture this so as our teams go back and engage and begin to refine the policy, we're keeping in mind some of the things that you all have lifted up. And hopefully, before you finalize your decision on those things that are most important, we'll share with you again just a glimpse of what our stakeholder groups have surfaced in their discussions thus far. Very quickly before we do that, this is just our policy development timeline. We've launched this work really back in July, August, as we transition from our attendance policy work and begin to convene a core group of individuals to start mapping out what our policy revision would look like. I did want to note that we have a district cross-functional team that is doing a lot of great work, and included on that team are a lot of our teachers, our principals, as well as our district leaders. But just wanted to kind of share with you what our timeline is. You'll note that in April and May of 2026, we want to bring before the board the policy for first read. So wanted to just kind of begin with the end in mind and let you know the work that's happening between now and May. I think I may have gotten ahead of myself a little bit and just shared a lot of what we've been doing with our stakeholder engagement group. In fact, today we have a couple of our students here from Early College, Nuria from Early College, and Marley from Jenkins High School, who are part of our Superintendent's Senate. And they were a part of the conversations. And while they do not have a presentation part today, that will come later as part of the full Superintendent Student Senate presentation. They will be available to answer any questions that may surface here in just a moment. I will just share very briefly with you some of the things that they lifted up. They talked about the consistent makeup work policies. They like the idea of a designated makeup day each 9 weeks. They expressed the concern around timely grade entry from their teachers. But they also advocated for their teachers to have protected time to enter grades. They wanted to have a better understanding of the weights of the assignments. And interestingly, they also thought it was important that we communicate to parents so that they have a better understanding, because when they have the conversation with the parents, they don't get it. And so it's important for us to be clear as possible around what the weights mean and some of the other implications of grading. So they'll be around to answer any questions. We had a chance to engage our teacher senate and we'll be revisiting with that group again. Many of those individuals are part of our core district working group. They lifted up a few things that were important as well around credit and grade recovery. They wanted to see clear and consistency across the district, ensuring that missing work guidance was provided with greater clarity. The time for grading is something that they lifted up, right? So yes, there's policy, language, but they also talked about the conditions so that they could grade. And so that was one of the things that surfaced. And then there were some specific things shared around standards-based grading in elementary school and supporting that. Again, our cross-departmental group, one of the things that was important for us to do very early on in our engagement was to really align around what we valued as a district and as leaders from different perspectives. So that was some of the work that happened as we begin to build the framework for the grading policy. I'll reserve some of the takeaways from the policy working group as we'll bring that forth a little bit later in a synthesized report, but just wanted to kind of share with you the work that's happening across these stakeholder engagement groups. And then finally, just as recently as this week, we've had an opportunity to engage with our many parent groups and an opportunity to get their thoughts and their experiences. And so we'll be meeting with we met with our faith leaders, we met with the FACE advisory group. We'll be launching later next month an opportunity to engage our PTSA and school council leaders to hear a little bit more about what's resonating with them, what are their experiences, what do they value, and we'll be, again, including that in a synthesized report to help shape the final language of the policy. So I'll pause there. Just wanted to share with you a little bit of the progress that's taking place. This is important to note that this is not done in isolation. This is a partnership, and the voices and the values of our many stakeholders will help shape the policy. And today, what we'd like to do at this time is pause and invite you all to have some conversations around those things that are important. I'll also invite Dr. Barnes up here as well to talk about what we know will be critically important once the policy is revised, and that's the implementation. One of the things that we've learned in our discussion with the Teacher Senate is that while a policy may exist, it's important for them to be aware of the policy and that we have the support mechanisms in place to ensure that schools and teachers are executing it in the way that it's designed. So I'll pause there and I'll invite discussion, and then I'll have Dr. Barnes come up.
I've started doing the top three, but before
And please feel free to do that. And what I'll do as we have the conversations, I'll display those results on the screen for us to see, okay?
Okay. Just as a general statement, I want to be sure that we're consistent across this whole district. I want to know that whatever's happening in kindergarten at Brock, that's the same thing that's happening at Gadsden Kindergarten, at Marsh Point. And when I say the same thing, I'm talking about the same expectations, the same processes, the same quality of teacher, because that's not something you can really put in a policy. So I guess just that consistency factor, so that if I'm a child at this particular school and I move over here, I'm going to get the same, hopefully, high level of instruction, support, interaction, that kind of thing. So that's a general statement about every subject, not just math. But since math is so critical right now and we're not doing well with it, I just want to make sure everyone is on the same page with that, and that's so important for all of our students.
Yes, ma'am. And I think what you reference is really important for our work, which is why we have a representation from all levels. And I failed to mention this is a great opportunity for me to plug this in. On our working groups are our principals as well and represented here today. Again, they don't have a speaking part, but you're more than welcome to ask them a question. They'll come up to the podium. Our principals, Principal McGuire from Woodville Tompkins, as well as Ms. Dozier from New Hampstead K-8 is here as well, as they bring a unique perspective for their grade bands to ensure that there is consistency with those grading practices, acknowledging that there are nuances at each of the grade bands that we have to be mindful of, and that is currently reflected in our policy and regulation. And so we have to just keep that in perspective as well.
And I'll just highlight, it's easier to get consistency around processes. But teachers have a certain amount of discretion and autonomy in classrooms. And so the level of assignments, the quality of assignments, the rigor of assignments, I just want to make sure we don't overpromise, because that, we can't say on this day of the week, everybody's giving this assignment, because this is the assignment that we have deemed of high quality.
No, and I'm not talking about that minutia at all.
Okay.
But here is
The
what I'm talking
processes,
about. Yes, the process, but if, and I say this again and again, the quality of instruction, that's something, that's not process, but that's something I think we should be able to at least aspire to.
Oh, certainly.
And
Yes.
to the principals out there, and really, I'm thinking more of elementary, when they're first getting started and deciding if they're going to love math or hate it. You know, you decide that, I guess, around second, third grade. Either you love math or you don't. But if I have a teacher in my school who consistently has these wonderful outcomes for the kids in second grade math or first grade math, that person should be accessible to all of the students on that grade level so that all the students get that expertise. Instead of maybe, you know, these 30 kids get it, and then the rest of them you all sent over here to Connie Hall, who, you know, barely got through school in math herself. So we have some obligations. It can't just be what we expect of the kids, or, you know, I need to stay back a year because I'm not ready. Parents, you need to leave this child back a year because you're not ready. But on our side, we're not doing anything but the same old in terms of our instruction. Because after all the talk, instruction is what, to me, is it's the basis of it. So I've had my say, and I'm going to be quiet now.
Dr. Rasmus-Brown.
Thank you, and thank you to everyone who's done the work on this policy. My question is just the general spirit of the feasibility of implementing true standardized grading. I mean, I know that when the push for higher level and consistent assessment came to us at the university, it was extremely difficult to separate the idea of balanced assessment of the same standards for all students across, you know, all levels of similar class with the professional creativity and intellectual expression of professors who wanted to be able to communicate material in a way that best met the students that were present. So when we actually dug down into the metrics of assessment, what exactly is a young person going to get when you articulate that, and how are you measuring whether they understand it? Actually, K-12 is advanced from higher education from looking at that because all the standards are laid out. But policing the standards at a teacher-by-teacher level is something that I would not want to be the one in charge of, doing that enforcement. And so my question is the feeling of how realistic teachers felt it was that we would be able to maintain the standards that we're putting in this policy. I'm always the one to say, we don't need to make rules we can't enforce. So we do this policy, what's the energy from teachers about what it would take to be able to have a policy that would work versus have policies that we say we're going to standardize and we say everybody's going to have the same process, but then you go from school to school and it's not there.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good question, and I think here's what I've learned is that there's different understanding around what is standards-based grading, and I think for some it is a simple process, not recognizing that our current policy is not necessarily written in such a way that it reflects what would we consider to be a standards-based grading policy as it's written. And so I think that's important to note. We have to teach the standards, and it's important for us as we prepare our students for those state assessments specifically, that what's happening in the classroom from an instructional level is aligned to the standards. I think what we are learning and what we're seeing is how teachers are, and maybe even in terms of the policy, the weights of the assignments and really the expectations that are there or are not there in terms of what is expected in terms of the number of assignments that you put in a grade book for a semester, which exist in many of our school handbooks, but does not necessarily exist within our district's policy and regulation. So I tried to answer that question a lot of different ways, but I think it's more around, we got to develop some shared understanding around the types of grading approaches and frameworks, because standards-based grading sounds and looks differently for a lot of different people, and that's part of the alignment that we've got to work on.
I appreciate, if I can just follow. I appreciate that answer, and I don't envy the work. It needs to be done, and I'm thankful that it's being pursued. I think that there's the rigor, and then there's the need for the flexibility that will inevitably need to appear, and we have to be prudent of when that flexibility is applied. So, for example, I'm teaching a course this semester. My students just had 43 days of not having an instructor. So all the assessments that were due while I was out due to a shutdown have to be adjusted. They still need those competencies by second week in December, though. And so there's had to be an adjustment of what those assignments need to look like. You can't just throw them all out because learning needed to occur, and assessment needed to occur. But there are instances where we need to be, as a district, flexible enough to accommodate circumstances, but paying enough detail to the machinery and how we're teaching and learning so that students are still getting what they need, even when we have to execute flexibilities, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So one thing I just want, and then I'll get you, Ms. Campbell. I think clearly defining the why of grades is really important. I don't clearly see it articulated. I think we all think we know why we have grades, but is it to assess what a student has learned? Is it to promote, have the basis for advancing to the next grade? Because clearly articulating that why, I think, is important. To me, the why is to demonstrate that a student is proficient in that subject and has met those standards, which then to me informs what some of the policies and practices should be, as far as whether it's a test corrections or other types of ancillary policies and practices that might then reflect in grades. I hope that makes sense.
No, you're right. It's the why, and it's defining first,
Right.
then being able to refine.
Yeah.
Right.
Do some of that in the values, didn't there?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah, I was trying to look at the chart
We'll
that
give you the
had
actual,
in
yeah.
there to see if that was in there. And I did see the values and I saw the vision, but it was more what should grading look like? And I guess the what values should drive grades across our district does kind of get to that point. And then to Dr. Hoskins Brown's point, it seems to me, and I agree, like we have how many teachers? Thousands of teachers across the district, but it seems to me a big part of this is that slide early on in the presentation where you have, assignment weighting, grading scales, late work, retake policies. To me, it seems like that's where the standardization needs to occur, and that is fairly easy to assess if teachers are doing that regularly. I saw somewhere in here about the use of Brightspace. I know that has been an ongoing challenge, but things like that it's still a lot of work, but those are things that seem like they could be measured and audited to help get us to that point of consistency. Ms. Campbell?
So I'm going to beat the proverbial dead horse here. But based on the things that I read in here about what the students said, what the teachers commented, I love that you guys do that and ask the people who are most affected by this, obviously. And to speak to the process and how we standardize it, the minimum floor grading was addressed by teachers, the minimum grade floor. And we've had many conversations about this in audit, et cetera. And what Ms. Grabowski just spoke to is precisely probably the biggest reason for me that I think we need to not do it, so that, it's equitable, it's standardized across schools. We already know now with audit that we struggle to provide the same rigor from classroom to classroom, let alone school to school. But as my kids are going to college or in college, I've seen, scholarship opportunities and GPAs when juxtaposed with kids from similar schools or in the same area. These grades matter to kids and they care a lot. But beyond just that, I think the why is the most important thing, is that we're trying to demonstrate mastery, not because we care more, let me say it this way. I think about grades like, to be medical here for a second, like a thermometer. Like if my thermometer reads 98 degrees Celsius or Fahrenheit every time I stick it, in my child's mouth, then it's going to tell me something that I want to see. But the problem might actually still be there, right? So I haven't addressed an actual problem. Now I've potentially not just ignored a problem, but I've given the problem legs, where now it could be worse and it could cause serious harm if the problem doesn't get addressed because it wasn't diagnosed with the thermometer, because the thermometer is just like 98, 98, 98, versus like comparing that to grades. If you give a child a 60 instead of a 0, when it's not happening at every school, I know for a fact it's happening at least one school because it's in their grading policy. And it's not just that it's not fair to kids who are competing or to kids who are trying really hard. That is true if they're getting true grades versus a 60 minimum floor grade. But it's also really unfair to the kids who are getting overlooked or falling through the cracks because they have a problem that needs to be addressed that we could help them with, where they don't struggle indefinitely through school or decide to quit or act out or fill in the blank with a bad circumstance or consequence. So I like this. I think this is really good. I think one way that it would be very easy to offer some more equity across schools would be to just say, a 0 is a 0, a 50 is a 50. Whatever grade you earn is what you get. And I love from our audit that a lot of teachers already do extra credit. Maybe we mandate, that there is an extra credit opportunity or credit recovery to a certain extent. And that way, some children don't feel like, well, that's not fair because I got this history teacher and that, she doesn't give extra credit or credit recovery or whatever, but this one does. Make it where there's a baseline requisite for it in every class. And go from there. But, the biggest issue I've seen with the lowest, floor for grade, like a 60 instead of a 0, 50 instead of a 0, is that kids are promoting to the next grade and they can't read. And their parents are getting extremely frustrated because they're like, but my kid's grades are great. How is this possible? But my child can't read at grade level. And why are they going to the next grade? I think it also adds distrust on teachers when teachers feel like maybe their hands are tied sometimes. So that's my 2 cents. But I love what you're doing here. I do think it's possible. I know we can't monitor every teacher all the time, but it would be very helpful to the principals, I'm sure, if we offered some standard for how many grades go in for each class, for each assignment type, classwork, homework, whatever, test, assessment. And if we make sure that grades are grades across schools and subjects, that the grade equals the true grade.
Dr. Howard Hall.
I'm going to somewhat touch on something that Ms. Campbell just mentioned. My major concern has always been typically grades K through third, because students in grades K through third consistently demonstrate academic performance below grade level at the end of the year, and the reason why I say many is based on third grade reading scores. However, they are advanced to the subsequent grade faced with the same challenges. If you want to consider the criteria for advancement or placement, it possibly shouldn't be the report cards, because report card grades are not consistent with their actual performance. You have children who are performing 1 grade below grade level 1.5, in some cases 2 grades below grade level, but when their parents look at their report card, they're making B's and C's or 80s and 70s. So we need to really focus on the criteria for advancement and placement. My grandmother, who was born in 1912, would always say to me, I didn't understand it for years, bend a sap while it's young. I'm like, what is she talking about? She explained a sap is a pine tree. She said, and that pine tree, when it's young, is easy to bend. So we need to stop advancing students' grades K through third when they are below grade level, because if we wait until they're middle high school, the sap is now a pine tree and it's hard to bend. That's my 3 cents worth.
Can always look to Dr. Howard Hall for the poetic expressions. Dr. Hoskin-Barrett.
Thank you. The credit recovery, grade recovery, and accepting or not accepting makeup work is, I think, is part of the challenge that we face with instruction and what we expect the credit recovery to accomplish. In credit recovery, are you expecting that learning is happening? Because likely it's not. It's a grade, it's a scramble for points to make a satisfactory grade to get out of that class or get out of that part of the course. The learning was happening when the material was being offered. The teaching, was happening when the material was being offered. If for some reason you weren't getting the material as a young person, and there isn't an intervention to help you get the material, you're not getting that material in 2 weeks of credit recovery near the end of the semester. You're getting a point grab. Now, some teachers don't do makeup work because they say, and I'll say professors. I know that there are some teachers, but some don't allow the makeup work because they say, I'm teaching while I'm teaching. If you need help or you need anything during that time, let me know during that time. If I create this makeup period or this makeup work, you're doubling my work of an already overworked teacher. And that's why some people don't offer the makeup work. I'm a teacher that offers makeup work. In my class, you can pass it. You may do an assignment 3 times. If you don't make a passing grade, you can turn it back in. You can't make an A. You can make a 70, you can make an 80, you can make a passing grade, but you can't resubmit to get an A. So you never pass the child who was making an A in the beginning and all along. you will work yourself to death as a student, because if you're not getting it and you're not doing the work, you're doing this assignment 3 times, because you're doing the full assignment. You're not just answering the ones you got wrong. But the point I'm making is this is a lot of work. It's a lot of work for the learner, and it's a lot of work for the teacher that doesn't always happen in credit recovery, because that's teaching and reteaching until the child gets it versus giving them a sheet or an exercise or something that they can mark off, get done, and make the grade. So if you mandate, mandating makeup work is you're mandating a process where they get credit recovery, but that's not necessarily going to mean that they're actually getting the material. And that's how you get promotion from one point to another, where you have a person that did all this credit recovery. Yeah, they did credit recovery. They didn't do cumulative learning. And we can't regulate that. And that's why I say this is a challenge of how are we developing policies that are making the end point that we want, which is a cumulative learner, someone who has mastered this information. I absolutely do not have the answers, but I don't have the answers. I am simply saying that I've seen this process with young people that do that race to the end of a class and they get promoted. They don't know that stuff. Versus those who struggle, maybe get a later grade because they've done the makeup work, but they've done the makeup work in collaboration with the teacher doing more teaching. So we're doubling the work for the teacher and we're doubling the work for the learner if we really are monitoring this really, really well. And I think the learners deserve it, but we do have to be prepared for what that means, for the teachers and the families and the learners.
Just going back years and thinking about some of the parent conferences I had to conduct, I'm thinking that there's a way that we could create a report card that made sense to us, to the teachers, to the kids, and to their parents. And what I'm thinking is, if you have part of your report card has a rubric where all that's there is your academic achievement. You got a 90, you got a 70, you got an 83, you got a 4. That's exactly what you got. So if we had GPAs in 3rd grade, that's what your GPA is. A total of those assignments you got for what you were given. But then on the other hand, you could have a rubric on the other side of the card that shows the parent, this is the responsibility I see this child put forth. This is the effort I see this child is making. This is my concept of what that child is trying to do to improve their grades, so that a parent doesn't get what Dr. Howard Hall was saying. They see an 80 and they think their child, a B, and really their child is a year below grade level. But doing it that way, you see as a parent, this is what my child's actual progress towards mastery is. This is the behavior my child is showing towards that work. So the parent knows where the support is needed. If I'm not doing well, what's happening over here? Am I turning in my assignment? Am I asking for extra credit? Am I staying after class if the teacher offers that? So that some kind of way, parents have a better understanding of what the teacher means on that report card and what the child understands that report card means. Does that make sense to people?
Let me get Mr. Smith and then Mr. Smith.
Thank you for your presentation so far. Let me ask you this question in the idea of knowledge and grading lining up with one another. I see that we have the audit and I see that the issues are there. But my question is, have we done any research to see what other districts are doing? What are they doing? How are they doing it? And if some of those practices can be implemented, if it's been successful.
Yes. So that's a lot of the work that's happening now. We're doing some policy benchmarking, looking at comparable districts here in the state of Georgia, but also across the country. And, like many districts, they too have navigated similar challenges to ensure that there is clarity within the grading policy, there's consistency across the grade bands, again, acknowledging that there are nuances for the specific grade bands. So those are some of the things that the policy working group has been tackling, and we'll be taking some of what we've learned from there relative to grade recovery, credit recovery, around this idea of standards-based grading and really having a shared understanding around what that means and what the lift could mean around a true standards-based grading sort of model. Those are some of the things. I don't have a lot of, I'm hesitant to share some of what has been successful because those are specific to those districts, specific to some of the things that they really focused on, but we'll have a synthesized report to highlight what we have taken in consideration from those districts' policies as part of our revision. Yep. Thank you.
With the elementary background I have, I think that the problem is with, again, K through third, are we grading on rigor? Or are we meeting the children where they are and grading them where they are? That's a big difference. Because if we are grading them on the rigor, they're not going to have 80s and 90s on their report card when they're reading one or two grade levels below grade level. So we really need to focus on the teachers understanding that you need to grade them based on the rigor that you are teaching. If you are teaching second grade and you're giving them first grade grades, because you met them where they were. They're on the first grade level, but they're in the second grade, so you making 80s. I mean, I hope this is making sense.
It is.
Because I think this is, so can we hear from somebody out here that's...
You were thinking the same thing. I was getting ready to invite Dr. Barnes up because it's getting hot up here to talk a little bit about.
Well, maybe not even Dr.
Dr. Barnes, yeah, absolutely.
No, not even. We have a principal out here.
We do, yeah.
Elementary, you know, someone that's really getting their hands
That's why
dirty.
they came, so we can.
Yeah, can we hear from...
Thank you for teeing them up. Yes. Who would you like to hear from?
Ms.
Dozier.
Dozier, come on. Come on down.
Good afternoon. So when we are grading students in K through 3, we should be, the standard is to grade them on the standard. And I think we're talking about a couple of different things. We're talking about classroom grades, and I completely understand your point. But when we talk about students performing below grade level, we're talking about looking at the assessment. And so sometimes the assessment does not encompass all of the standards that students are being taught and graded on. And then also in K1 and 2, sometimes those are students' first times experiencing the technology as well as their first time taking assessments. So that is a very valid point. I think we need to find a good balance between the grades for the standards and the tasks and activities that they're doing in the classroom, along with the assessments that are being provided. Because even at the upper grades, you can also have students who perform very well in different types of tasks, but do not perform well on assessments. So as a principal and as part of the committee that we're doing with Mr. Butler, those are some of the things that we're looking at. But I do agree that there should be a balance, and we do need to be a little bit more consistent at our lower grades with keeping the expectations, not only just in school, but also communicating that to parents so that they are supporting us with that. Because when they send us their babies, if they get a red or yellow or 60, you know, those are some of the things that we're kind of weighing in the balance and trying to find a good balance between the multiple different factors that influence.
And that's good to hear because parents basically look towards report cards. All the other things, they don't matter. It's whatever they're making on those report cards. So we really need to hone in on report card grades because that's the Bible for many parents. Oh, they're making B's on the report card, they're doing fine, and they're struggling reading. They're behind, they're below grade level. So that's the where the rubber meets the road, actually.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, but thank you.
To the point of the report card, and you know, now that we have Power School, like we're kind of beholden, I think, to the Power School format of how grades are presented, and it does have. I mean, it's all grades, right? It doesn't reflect those other assessments that are also part of how we are evaluating the progress of our students. So are we thinking about the ways in which we are trying to present an entire picture of student performance? And then a kind of a second part of that I would ask is, are we also looking at other qualities of what make our students to be prepared to be successful and productive citizens, such as courtesy, behavior? I mean, all of those values that we've talked about and things that are in the programs like Leader in Me. I know that's a step further, and maybe it's not something that happens now, but I'd be curious as to your thoughts or if that has come up. And would love to hear from our students if they think we should be evaluating some of those other characteristics that go beyond just grades, but go towards, fostering an environment that will lead to success for our students. So, sorry, I know that was a whole lot at one time.
Yeah, I'll certainly invite our students up to share any thoughts that they may have. I will say, though, that keep in mind that there is a conduct grade component to the regulation, so that's captured there. I am not aware of any specific challenges with regards to PowerSchool that would prevent us from maximizing all of its features. I think we, as a district, can decide in terms of the weights specifically how that looks in the PowerSchool system itself. So I'm not aware of any of those challenges that may prevent us from doing that. But I would love to hear from our students and their experience or any specific thoughts that they may have on some of the grading.
Hi everyone, my name is Nuria Middleton and I go to Savannah Early College.
My name is Marley Taylor. I go to Jenkins for their engineering program.
Yes, and we have a couple of notes that we marked down just so when we did get up here. All right. Yeah, so we had everything together. So first off, I want to start with what we did in sessions. One of our main things was the grading policy, and how we came together was we started off with this icebreaker that allowed us to come up with different ideas in a set time limit. So when we broke off into these groups, it was easier for us to come up with quick ideas and quick exchanges, but that also had supplement to them to allow us to actually address these problems. You want to say something?
Yeah, I would like to add to that. I feel like one of the main things from that activity was that we were supposed to think like a kid, not necessarily like an adult. And that doesn't mean think like a kid. That means just hold on to your creativity that you used to express when you were a kid. So.
Yes, and it was really beneficial because it allowed us to not only see what would be beneficial for us next year, but also with the younger grade levels. And I see that is something that you guys are really trying to address here today. And I really like that because I have a niece, and she was one of the people that did fall under there, and they finally got her up. And one of the ways they did address that, I hear, was the after school tutorials, or not only that, but with the progress reports. I hear you all are trying to figure out which ways to actually implement. And one of the ideas I had, and I don't know, but I go to Savannah State. So when we take midterms, one thing they told us at Savannah State is that our midterm will be our grade when they give out those progress reports, because in college. So one thing, and I know you all have like map testing, so if we gave the students, and not technically a really grade on it, but if that was able to be advocated to the parents as a grade, because I see when they see the A's and B's, they're like, my child is okay, but if we took those grades they got on the midterm, or that number they got on the midterm, and translated it to a grade, it would show parents that, oh, even though my child has an A in the class, they actually still need help underneath it, and that could be really beneficial. So that was one of my things I would like to add.
I kind of have like a lot to say, but this is covering a different aspect of grading policies. So to me, the why for grading policies is assessing students on their abilities to like the fullest extent. And sometimes that can't be done in a linear way, because growth isn't linear, and that's exactly what education's about. And I feel like for students, high education entails allowing us to feel as though we have the support that we need. And that doesn't necessarily mean like a free pass. It just means extra opportunities and extra time for us who might be struggling, and that we can prove our abilities through hard work and growth, which is exactly what learning is. And at our last student Senate session, we talked about that in not only our small breakout groups, but our large group breakout groups. And we expressed that through maybe adjusting how the grades are weighted, because not everybody is a good test taker, through extra credit or makeup days or even morning tutorials for students who may be busy. Like for me, I'm a student athlete, so sometimes having to constantly go to practice and then go to games, and then on top of that, all of my club extracurriculars that I have leadership positions in, it's kind of difficult to go to tutorial after school when I have those responsibilities. And I know that other students have jobs, they have family responsibilities, so people might not always be able to attend after school.
And one of the ways we were thinking about like balancing out the weight of it would be 45 to 55 assessments, so 45% classwork and 55 assessments. This allows assessments to still have that overage to where they weigh a little bit more, but not totally, because for me, a big part time, I did have really bad testing anxiety. So like before I take tests, I would get really bad stomach aches before or after. And it was because of how much it weighed or how much it depended on my grade. So if that 45, 55, it would help balance it out to where even though I might have it would allow for mistakes to happen on tests, but not determine if the student gets the grade they deserve, because I could be putting 100% of my effort, but when it comes down to that test, it's like, oh wait, this is just not something. So if we were able to address that and help with that, and also equity within the classes, I know that's something you guys were talking about, a minimum and maximum of work that should be given within each subject, because I know we were saying classes, but math might need more work than what a science class or a reading class would need. So if we could have a balance between those subjects, it would allow for, let's say Marley and I, we go to different schools, but it will allow for us to both be learning the same knowledge. And if she has a higher grade than me, it's not because her teachers either, it's because she put in more work than me. It would allow for equity within the schools and each school, so that each student has the opportunity to be great without the oversightage of like, oh, I have more assignments, so they have less.
And to add on to what she's saying about the minimum and maximum, which we did talk about at our Senate meeting, is I think that it could be also applied to the different levels. So for example, honors, AP, and regular classes, because for AP classes, although they are meant to be rigorous, sometimes it's an excessive amount of work, which fails students kind of, if that makes sense. It's more based on how much work can we give them and not how are they understanding this rigorous content. Yeah, and we also wanted to talk about makeup days, like I kind of touched on a little bit earlier. So once again, it is really important for students to be able to prove their abilities, even though they might not be able to show up after school, because I even know some students who have to leave early from school because of their bus routes. So I just think it would be fair to allow district-wide makeup days or even morning tutorials.
And one of the ways we were thinking about that was Saturday school in a way, but not because it would just be, it would allow for the students to make up those days. It could also build better teacher and student relations while also peer-to-peer relationships. Because if I'm in Saturday school with my other peers who are also struggling, I'll see it's not only just me, it's also other students that need help. And it can bring a part of a community that not a lot of high school students get to be a part of, because once you get to a certain age, it's like, oh, well, you're about to be grown now, so let's just go on about our way. But if we gave students that support to allow them to realize, no, I'm still here to help, I'm still here to guide, and also to lean on our peers, it would be beneficial. So I think that was, or advisement days, if that's not something, that Saturday school, advisement days will also be a really good possibility, because advisement days, I know at my school during advisement, it's not a lot we do. We talk about, or they just give us after the first 2 weeks, because advisement is to help get adjusted. But after the first 2 weeks, it's like, oh, well, it's advisement. So if we could make those advisement days mandatory makeup days, it would allow for students not to fall so behind. So if you do have a job and you can't do this, or you do have sports, it would allow them to make up while still in school without interfering with other things they have going on.
Yes, and maybe one of the last things that I have to say is, at Student Senate, not only does it build community, but we got to think about all of our different perspectives as students, and we got to obviously pick our favorite topic, and for us it was grading policies. And grading policies is actually my second most important. My first most important is mental health, but I feel as though mental health is very dependent on our grading policies, and I think in order to properly assess students, we have to focus on changing some of the policies within the county.
Yes. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Thank you.
We're getting them a job, Mr.
Thank you
Reed.
so much
Find
for
them a
being
job.
here and for sharing your tremendous insight and wisdom with all us adult people sitting up here, because clearly y'all have it figured out. So thank you for sharing.
And they weren't prepared. And, you got a sneak peek of the full superintendent student center. I think you'll see them next semester. So I know we've got another topic on our agenda for today. I'll close and allow Dr. Barnes to kind of wrap us up. But just wanted to share again what our next steps are as we continue the collective work. We'll take the information that you shared today in the discussion, continue to engage in more conversations, but we'll begin to finalize some of the stakeholder feedback. We'll share that with you, possibly at our next AEC in January, to give you an opportunity to make some sense of that. And that will include our parent feedback, student senate, teacher policy working group, and then we'll begin to prepare that policy revision for your review. And again, we'll share that along the way with the board so that we can have that prepared for a first and second read in April and May. We know, again, that what's important is once this policy is in place, regardless of how much we refine, there is a change management component. And so I'll close by having Dr. Barnes share some of the additional next steps.
As he's coming up, Ms. Hall, I think, had a question.
Mr. Butler, for those of us who don't have children in school, is it possible for the next meeting that you could bring a copy of a report card of what our report card looks like, elementary and high school, so that we're actually familiar with what's out there right now?
Sure.
Okay.
Show you my son. He might not like that.
Can I ask a quick question? Just the credit recovery. Isn't that part of our absentee protocol now? Yeah.
Well, I was going to invite Ms. McGuire, but you can come up and share a student perspective as well. But look, okay.
In our school, it is, I see that it is a part of you guys' policy, that credit recovery, but it's not always enforced. So, and then a lot of our, with the new absentee policy, when we brought it up to our teachers, they didn't technically know that that was able to happen. So,
Uh-oh.
yeah, so it's like, it's not enforced, so we could bring better knowledge to the teachers so that they understand it and allow students, that would definitely help them with credit.
And I want to make sure I understand your question as
The
well.
attendance recovery, like if they miss so many days, then they have the option of 5 days that right? So it's something that has to be offered now within certain guidelines?
Yeah, but that's not credit recovery. That's just simply attendance recovery.
Recovery.
Got it.
Yeah.
Seat time, not making up, like Dr. Hoskins Brown was speaking to, we're not making up grade.
Yeah.
Okay,
But
got
I
it.
do want to emphasize that when they make up those days, it is with the intent that they are also recovering the learning that was missed.
Understood.
And I hope we can move that beyond intent to actual, right, anyways. Yes. Dr. Barnes.
Good afternoon. So a lot was shared, and as Dr. Butler transitioned, he talked about the change management process. This is an endeavor that starts with the why, what we're doing, and how we're going to do it. And so that's how we're going to frame the implementation over the next iteration of this plan, is to build principles, awareness, working knowledge of the changes in the policy, because ultimately they're the ones that got to make sure it happens at a high level in their school. The goal here is to reduce variance so that students in one school doesn't have a different experience in another school. That is generated when we may not be totally clear on the changes. So a significant amount of work on the leader development. But then we have to create multiple at-bats for teachers, because teachers is where we have the least amount of time where we bring them together in large groups So we're going to build in screencast, a lot of virtual sessions to educate teachers so that they are hearing the information directly from our committee about the changes, and it's not all that pressure is put on principals also to deliver it. But we got to make sure that we are going deep in building knowledge, because the first day of implementation has to be an accurate day. And so we got to make sure that everybody is really abreast of the changes. And then the second piece around this is the development of parents. So creating easier to understand FAQs for parents to understand how we grade students moving forward and what to expect. And do that in a systematic way. So we're thinking about how we distribute that more centralized, more so than leaning on schools. If we lean on schools, we could potentially create variance. So again, the whole thing here is to reduce variance, that the same information is getting out to multiple stakeholders in the same fashion. We just taking advantages of different ways of sharing that information with them. Once that information is out there and we have built knowledge, it is going to be very important about the monitoring of this. And so this is where the challenge comes. And we have to be very intentional. So we're already beginning to start a monitoring cadence of just grades with our current policy. And that looks like principal supervisors asking principals to open, your grade books. Let's look at access of how many grades are being given to kids. What is your DL failure list? What are the supports that you're putting in place at this time of the year? You have X number of students that are failing. What are the support plans put in place? It's going to be a lot of intentional questions so that leaders are aware of what it is that they need to be doing to ensure that students are successful, because grades are a final decision. So once that grade happens at the end of the quarter or the end of the semester and the end of the year, the grade book is closed, and then we go to the next quarter. And we want to make sure we don't get to that point. And so we got to make sure that whatever we decide on moving forward, the monitoring piece is baked into the principal coaching, but it's also building the capacity of the principals so they can do the exact same thing with their assistant principals, their department leaders, and their teachers. We can't leave anyone out in the food chain in this change management process. And the overarching arc of this is constant communication around the changes that are going to take place. Constant, open, transparent communications to everybody in the food chain, and just constantly continuing to give them that feedback. So I'll entertain any questions.
Can I ask for clarification? Thank you for that. Around two pieces. First, I'm glad that you mentioned the teacher feedback and the communication that you'll be doing with the teachers. We've talked before that unfortunately some teachers may or may not relate with their Teacher of the Year from their school that serves on the Professional Senate. So have we pushed out information to teachers now that this process has started? And if they have input, concerns, to please get with their Teacher of the Year to be able to carry that forward to Professional Service Senate to make sure that they're engaged at this point?
My vision for Professional Senate, and I hope it's being implemented on any topic we discuss in Professional Senate, should be going back to the school for the principal to be aware of and to inform other teachers. They are the conduit between those teachers and getting it back to us the next month.
Okay.
Now, the extent to which that's happening, I can't speak to that, but that is the overall vision.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So I would say specifically to this process that is happening, again, as we've engaged with our Teacher Senate, they are actually engaging with their colleagues at their schools, which is why we will be reconvening in February so that we learn more about the conversations that they've had. So they'll be expected to bring that back as we continue our engagement with that group.
Wonderful.
And to
Thank you.
extend that, the same process is being used with our student
With students,
senate.
great.
So students, their homework assignment for our next student senate is to convene a group of other students at their school to get feedback on the same topics that they got, so that they can generate that to bring it back to the January Senate.
Okay, fantastic. And then we've got April and May is when we anticipate the first and second policy read. So does that mean that we would anticipate that the policy would become effective then and for the 26, 27 school year? Or are we using that year for communication?
So I would probably back up and say we need to bring final read to you all a little bit sooner.
I would agree, and that's why I
'Cause
wanted
we
to ask the
can't-
question.
We can't create the communications, the training until you first approve a policy.
Right.
But most of the rollout would be occurring probably in summer leadership with school leaders, and then
Okay.
later in the summer, before school starts with teachers.
Okay.
But again, we don't have a lot of time with teachers, and our calendar doesn't permit a lot of time with teachers. And so that's, again, where interpretation can sometimes be off, because we just don't have a lot of time built in.
Right. And so I don't know, maybe if it's possible to back that up to March and April instead of April and May for first and second read. I know you've got a lot in here, and I don't want to shortchange the process, but, okay, thank you. Ms. Hall?
I'm not understanding something. Mr. Barnes, are you saying that we will convene with teachers and do some modeling of what we expect so that they get, this is how you have a grade based on standards, mastery of standards. This is what a grade, how you develop that grade.
Well, so, no, what I was saying is you have twofold. So what we do with leaders, they have to cascade it down in their schools, so principals have to do that. What we want to do is build the tools to help the leaders educate their teachers on how to implement any revisions in the grading policy by creating how-to videos, overcasting, so that the principals have all the talking points to build their teachers' knowledge. Because we won't have an opportunity to bring all the teachers
Right.
together on a regular
So
basis.
does this end up being a kind of opinion? It's my opinion that 12 grades would constitute a good thing for a quarters thing? Or are we saying best practices show that you need these many opportunities to grade so that you have a fair look at what a child is actually
So
doing?
our goal
Where are
is
the
to-
best
going a step
practices
further.
coming in?
Yeah, we want to establish
We're going
minimum
a
and
step further.
maximums.
We're not saying best practices. We're saying you shall have.
Oh, see, we haven't, we haven't heard
X
that.
number of informal assignments, Y number of formal assignments.
Yes.
Did you
We're
all hear
saying
that?
you
I didn't
shall.
hear that. See, we didn't hear that.
Well, so
It's
we
not,
want
it's not a
to create
safety-based
minimums
policy,
and
so you can say shall.
So if you remember one of our students, when she referenced that, so the goal is to have minimum number of assignments in a particular area and maximum number. And what that does is that clears out a student who had one test who made
Right.
a very low score and it killed their grade, or they could have had one test and they did extremely well and it gave them a very high grade. And so that's why we do minimum and maximums based off our learnings that we were learning from other school districts that have did this as well. And of course, we have to pressure test that, so to put in various scores, minimum and max, that we can say, okay, this is a true reflection of a student's learning in a quarter if they completed X number of assignments for like testing or preparation or things of that nature.
Oh, well, that clears it up. I didn't hear that. I missed that whole part.
Dr. Howard Hall?
Yes, thank you. Most of our Title I schools have parent engagement facilitators. So how are we engaging them in the process? And I'll give an example. Last night, I attend actually 5 neighborhood meetings monthly. In my district, we just have a lot of neighborhood meetings. And I was talking about the Q&As of attendance. And Butler's parent facilitator was there, Dr. Wallace. She's also the attendance recovery coordinator. And she was able to explain to the parents, about what was going on. So is that per school? Or are we looking at this from a district level too? actually engage our parent engagement facilitators.
Right, so in the collection of information, we actually can do that, but the actual implementation of the policy, if you go back to, you remember I talked about creating resources that can be turnkey. So this allows anybody, whether it be the parent facilitator, the assistant principal, a volunteer in the school, if we provide enough how-to tools, FAQs, it preps them to have those conversations with parents. So when parents do come to our parent facilitators or advocates, then they are equipped to support the parent in understanding the information, and then also support the parent on say, hey, so now that you know this information, here are some follow-up questions that you can ask during your parent-teacher conference. So yes, like in a perfect world, that's what we want to do. We want to develop all of the tools so whoever engages with it, they have the particular things to support parents.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for the robust discussion. I think we are ready to move on to our next agenda item. And I would ask that, I think it's a fairly short presentation. Maybe we can just go through it and then save questions for the end.
Right, good afternoon, everyone.
Afternoon.
Doesn't seem like it was very long ago that we were talking about an ELA textbook adoption, and here we are talking about math. All right, so good afternoon. So we are in the middle of our math textbook RFP process. We had a pretty pivotal week this week, which we'll talk about in our timeline. This is a pretty extensive process for those of you who were here and remember the ELA adoption. It takes a little while to make sure we select just the right thing. So our goals in really selecting a resource are to continue to support our teachers and our students. We've gotten some feedback from them, currently been leveraging the math learning plans that come from the state of Georgia. And there are some great components to those learning plans, and then there are some things that provide some challenges for our teachers and students that we're hoping through the adoption process that we're going to be able to address. Good. Fun. All right. In terms of what we're looking for, of course, standards alignment is going to be our number one goal in looking for a resource. That can at times be challenging because we don't have a lot of resources that write specifically for the state of Georgia. So that takes a pretty extensive process and look for to make sure that whatever we do select is completely aligned or as closely aligned to our standards 100% as we can. Looking for relevant and diverse content that meets the needs of all of our students and teachers. Looking for evidence-based instruction, those things that follow. We've heard old math and new math and things like that, but what is really research-based and evidence-based math? How do students learn, and what supports are there available for teachers to make sure that our students are able to learn math? Looking for some technology integration. Right now, everything that comes from the state really comes in the form of a PDF and hyperlinks, and that can become challenging for teachers and present some ease of use challenges that teachers experience in terms of making sure that their instruction, their planning process, and the scaffolds that they provide to teachers are really succinct and what students need. Of course, you've heard conversation about rigor today, so really making sure that the resources that we select are in the rigor alignment to our state standards, and then looking for grade-appropriate assessments. We have our NWEA MAP assessments, we have DRC Beacon, and some other things. But when we get into grading conversations, we need to make sure that we have viable assessments for our teachers to gauge student learning along the way, to be able to look for strengths and weaknesses with students, and be able to give both formative and summative data to them. Looking at the comprehensive math framework, there are some unique changes that came with our state standards a couple of years ago. So we're really digging into procedural as well as strategic fluency, making sure that our students understand how to build fluency, not just from an algorithm, but conceptual fluency so that they can transfer those concepts across learning. Building number sense routines, that's very important. Some of the things that we see, those routines tend to drop off as students get older, but should not. They're equally important, just take on a different look as students begin to move through and matriculate through middle and high school. Statistical reasoning, being able to look at that from not just an analysis, but opportunity, but providing students with the opportunity to interpret data as well. And then getting into modeling. You can have a math model, but you're not really doing mathematical modeling if you take that situation out of context. So finding math that gives students an opportunity to do math in real world context, in ways that they're going to see math happen in their day-to-day lives. And then supporting mathematical discourse, a phrase that we have been talking about in our department lately is rigor lives in the quality of student voice. So if we don't provide students with the opportunity to talk about math and dig into math, then they're not really able to show their true understanding. Also supporting all learners to ensure that we have supports for our EL students, our students with disabilities, as well as our students who express the ability to be high achievers in math, making sure that we have scaffolds, directions for teachers that help them navigate through those scaffolds, ensuring that we have different resources for students with disabilities, and that could be in terms of math problems, but that could be in terms of the way math is expressed, whether that's through models, through hands-on manipulatives, and things of that nature. And then again, making sure advanced learners have ways that they are looking to enrich and take math beyond just what is in the grade level standards for their time period. Our time period, speaking of, I mentioned we had a critical moment this week, so we have completed the request for proposals. We did have several submissions. Those notifications of who was shortlisted actually go out this week, so I can't really give you the results of that yet because those notices have not been officially delivered. But we did have our RFP. It was posted. We had several submissions. We met as an RFP panel this week to move into the next phase that Mr. Childers will talk to you about. Those notices are due to go out to vendors by the end of this week. In that panel, we had participants that were mostly school-based. It was very important to us that we had content-specific, very knowledgeable mathematicians who were part of that team. So we had curriculum and instruction supports, but we also had persons who represented each of the various grade bands. So we had a K-5 expert, someone who was expert at the 6-8 level, the high school level, as well as our virtual world, to make sure that we were, in moving into the next phase, that we were taking in all of the various needs across the K-5 and K-12 spectrum, because that's a large grade span to cover and make sure you select the right math product. And I will turn it over now to Mr. Childers.
Good afternoon, everyone. As we transition into phase 2 of this adoption process, this is where we bring in more voices into the decision-making process, and then actually get an opportunity to observe how these materials perform in real classrooms. Beginning in January, our educators across all grade levels who participate in the pilot will have opportunities to review all the top-rated program materials. So all those who are shortlisted, they will have an opportunity to view those. They will continue using the same evaluation rubric to ensure a fair and consistent review of quality and alignment. We are also engaging our families and a broader community by making these materials available for public review during that same window. We value transparency and want our community to have meaningful input into this process. We will conduct a structured classroom pilot to ensure that we gather authentic feedback from teachers and students who are experiencing these resources and not just on paper and what the proposals have presented to us. To share more about the pilot process structure, vendors designated as top rated will supply both print and digital materials so that teachers can thoroughly test usability, engagement, and the level of student support provided. So between January 5th and January 16th, participating pilot teachers will receive targeted professional learning with those particular products to help them feel confident in implementing these new materials. And then from January 26th through February 27th, 2 classrooms per grade level per vendor will use the new textbooks as a primary instructional resource. In our planning, we have been intentional about selecting schools that represent the full diversity of SCCPSS, including differences in student populations, community context, and school structures. This ensures that every type of learning environment in our district has a voice in this process. Throughout the pilot, we are collecting structured feedback aligned to the same rubric and used in the same RFP evaluation. This ensures that our final decision and recommendations reflects consistent criteria throughout the process. This gives us a really reliable picture of the instructional impact before a district-wide investment is made. We are also using our lessons learned from the previous ELA adoption process to make sure that our math rollout goes smoothly and we are very proactive. One of the primary areas of focus is reducing early stage overload for teachers by making it clear what's essential instruction versus what is optional enrichment. We are planning differentiated professional learning approaches so that educators can get the level of support that best matches their needs, whether it's the technology integration or if it's the new instructional routines. We currently rely very heavily, as Ms. Burkett noted earlier, on the Georgia Godot plans for pacing and instruction direction. These plans provide strong alignment to our state standards, but teachers sometimes have to seek out additional supplemental materials in order to provide adequate practice and real-world relevance for students. So an adopted math curriculum will give us an opportunity to strengthen what we are already doing, provides more built-in practice for students to reinforce and deepen learning, helps teachers make other interdisciplinary connections, especially with science, data literacy, and authentic problem solving. It provides necessary scaffolds and extensions to ensure that all students can engage meaningfully in grade level content. Ultimately, the adopted math resource will complement the learning plans and help ensure more consistent, rigorous math instruction occurs in every school in our district. Once we have collected all the feedback from teachers, students, the pilot data, and reviewed input from families and staff, our team will then bring a final recommendation to the superintendent, who will share that recommendation with you all.
It's important to note, while not stated, I'm sure you all can infer this will have a cost implication. And you know how expensive the reading curriculum is, because we continue to pay for that. This adds additional expense. So that's not stated directly, but I'm lifting it up because you're going to see it again.
Thank you for that. We have, well, you want to ask your question? No, you can ask. Do we have that identified as line item already in our budget? For the
So
textbook
we will be
adoption?
launching budget development, which is also in alignment with strategic plan priorities in the next 10 days. Our team will get an email about that today, in fact. So it's marked right now in my head, not necessarily in a document. I know that we have to have space for this to exist in our budget. However, I can't anticipate the cost because we haven't yet selected a curriculum.
Okay. Do we not have some of those funds that would have to come out of this year's budget if we're going to adopt it in April?
Out of this year's budget, we didn't allocate money for math curriculum in the current budget that we're in.
Okay. So we wouldn't actually make the purchase then until after July 1?
Potentially. We could make it prior to, depending on, if you all remember with the reading curriculum, we use fund balance.
Right.
I am also evaluating budgets now and vacancies on a monthly basis. There will be a period of time in which there's a reconciliation, so we could use funding from the current budget potentially to seed and begin this in the current year. So there is a potential we could.
Okay.
I also just want to stamp for everybody, it's not just the materials with a budget. You're paying for training. There, you know, it's much bigger than just books
Yep.
and materials. And so, again, I'm just highlighting the potential cost implications here.
Okay. Let me get Dr. Howard Hall, then Dr. Hoskinson, and Ms. Hall.
I hope it's not a unwise question, but do we have a lead math director at the district level, mathematics? Because I know that you're language arts, Ms. Paquette, if I'm not mistaken.
Everything.
But you don't
But
need
we have
everything. You
our
need to have
literacy. We have
a
Ms.
specialized math
We do have,
that's taking the lead and you know, the lead and the charge on something this massive.
we do have 3 math teacher specialists, and they are very much a part of this process. In fact, they've been sort of shepherding us through the process.
But they're
because
shepherding,
very-
excuse me, I'm sorry. I'm just disturbed that we have people shepherd, you know, they're assisting you all. We don't have a math person at the top level. I'm accustomed to having, you know, we have language arts and reading people at the top. And not math, but they're specialists that's assisting you all. No reflection on you or Ms. Paquette at all.
So I understand what you're saying. We do have Ms. Goldman who shepherds our reading, a lot of our reading work, but
Right.
she works directly with our curriculum and instruction team. This, again, goes back to the number of people we put in central office to do this work has a cost to it that often comes back as a concern. And so when you talk about adding another person at the top, just understand that that has implications when we get to budget season and people start talking about bloat at central office.
I guess
So I'm trying to balance both.
I understand, but it's just being neglected. Math is just neglected. We have all of these tops and nobody in math.
Dr. Hoskinson Brown?
My question is way easier, because that's a hard question,
That's a hard
and good luck generating the answer. My question was just about, if it's coming to us in April, what's your runway for your need for the board to implement? Like, if we vote on it in April, when are boots on the ground, the training happening, everything
Let
coming?
you all speak to that, but immediately after. But you can talk about the actual dates.
So the launch of the training will happen with teachers during pre-planning during the month of July.
Okay.
But we'll start some pre-training with leaders prior to that time.
Okay, so you do need the money immediately in the spring. You do need the money for the training as well as the books and the platform and all that when it's voted in April. It's not like you vote in April and then the allocation can happen after July. There is a need for money.
We would need to seed some of it at the beginning to get it started, yes. But
Okay.
the primary bulk of the funding would come out of the next budget
Okay,
cycles.
thank you.
Absolutely.
Ms. Hall?
Okay. Thank you for bringing that up, Dr. Howard Hall. I worry about that our superintendent feels constricted and that we have situations like this where we need a person directly responsible for, and the word shepherd is nice, but I mean, to direct, inform, and build us up. And this whole thing about 208 being bloated, if we need to have a bloated workshop, whatever we need to do, we cannot be found to be timid about preparing our students for life. And that's what we're sitting here doing. So that's another topic, but thank you for bringing that up because it does not reflect well on us. I don't feel that we have to be concerned about something like that. But what I wanted to ask you, Mr. Childress, and good to see you, is the textbooks that we decide to buy. We all, our board members, we all got an email today from a friend of education stating that San Diego State University has made a concern report to the citizens of California that they have college-level students there who were not able to solve the problem 7 + 2 = A + 3. What does A equal? That they had freshmen there who could not do that. So my thought is our textbooks as guides need to start with the kindergarten concepts. Whatever the concepts are you need when you go off to college, the basis for those concepts should start in kindergarten. So whatever that is, that 7 + 2 = A + 3, some version of that should start in kindergarten. And I know that that's done, and that's possible in just about, in every field of endeavor. The vocabulary that you need as you grow from kindergarten to 12th grade, the routines, the practice, all of that should be encapsulated in the textbooks that we decide to get, so that when you're at 6th grade or 8th grade, you learn things in kindergarten, capsules of what you now know at a much higher level when you get to 6th and 8th grade. Does everyone understand what I'm saying? So hopefully, Ms. Burkett will find the textbooks that can help our children do that and begin that process when they're 5 years old, so that by the time they're 19, you know, it's part of who they are.
And that is and I'll let Ms. Burkett speak too, but that is the intent of the process. And we want to make sure that we share with the community that when we have that review period, we encourage everyone to come and help review those materials and provide feedback. It's going to be vitally important because whatever we select, we want to make sure that we have all voices involved and we select the best product.
And much more granular than that. That speaks to the number sense routines that I mentioned, starting as early as kindergarten and ensuring those number sense routines don't fall off once we hit the middle grades and high school so that they don't miss those concepts.
Mr. Moss?
So you say you have 3 math people that are helping you with this, math specialists, right? Okay, so you have a lot of faith in those specialists, right?
Yes, sir.
You believe that those math specialists are top-notch, right?
Absolutely.
I'm going to agree with you. I am not going to approve a 6-figure salary for someone to come in just so we can have someone at the top. I trust what you're doing. And if at some point, because yes, I'm one of the people that criticized too many of those positions at central office. I really criticize it when you have that many people that can do that job. I'm only one vote. So you can, and I'm sure we have plenty of people on this board that disagree with me, but that's part of it, what we do. But if you have faith in those 3 people being able to assure that our kids are getting a quality math education, and by the way, aren't our math scores up? Thank you. All right. So, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to take privilege as chair to redirect this because I think this is a much larger conversation that feeds into our budget and our strategic plan. Is that okay, Ms. Hall?
That's fine. I
Okay.
can certainly wait.
Because it's also 3:37, I want to be respectful of everyone's time. I do want to just leave a nugget with you to think about how will these resources potentially plug into remote learning? I know we don't have a lot of those days, but I had a parent call me very upset that his elementary school student was sitting there with her iPad and just picking a number until she got it right and clearly not understanding the math concepts. And then also how this might integrate with our ELA curriculum, particularly for project-based learning. Are there streams where we can bridge the gap of ELA and math to really make it all come home for students? So I would leave those two nuggets with you as we close out today. Dr. Watts, any closing thoughts that you'd like to share? All right, well, I know we are a few minutes over. Apologize, but thank everyone for the robust conversation, and we'll see you at the next gathering. And happy Thanksgiving to those we may not see before then.